And on to the story of the day, the SABC Chief Operating Officer Hlaudi Motsoeneng has made headlines for his decision to black out any visuals of violent public protests. He says unapologetically that this move is part of a transformational strategy within the public broadcaster. Motsoeneng took his autocratic rule further to banning any criticism of the SABC and himself on their channels and radio stations. On the debate, we ask if this smells of censorship or responsible journalism. Joining us in studio is William Bird, Director at Media Monitoring Africa, and Micah Reddy as Media Freedom and Diversity Organizer and a member of Rights to Know. We are also expecting the DA Shadow Minister for Communications, Phumzile van Dam. And you at home are most welcome to give us a call as always on 011-542-2186, or you can tweet at ANN7 TV. Maybe I should recuse myself, welcome gentlemen, from this interview, considering it's my former employer. But I think things have just sort of deteriorated from worse to worse over the years. Has the mold always been set for the public broadcaster?
No, I think that at our point of transition, there was very clear, very deliberate, very strong efforts made to make the shift from a state broadcaster to a genuine public broadcaster. We've seen some remarkable things. We know that there still are some amazingly talented people there that have been trying to do some incredible things, but I think that we are seeing, Mr. Motsoeneng, perhaps the only thing he's correct about is the transformational agenda from a public to a state broadcaster is his intent, and that's becoming more and more clear. So I don't think it's a question of censorship or responsible TV. It's who's responsible for the censorship, and perhaps that image is quite apt in that particular case.
Yeah, Micah, maybe the allure and temptation for any government of the day is to essentially have influence in those state assets, as we see with other state or SOEs. Why is it different with a broadcaster?
Yeah, well, this reeks of an attempt to shelter a political elite that's increasingly insecure in its legitimacy, I think. And I must echo William here. What we've seen lately is particularly egregious, particularly alarming, considering that so much was done to transform the SABC. And in the last few years, and particularly in this last year, there have been some very, very alarming cases of censorship, such as the censoring of Project Spear, which was in the news recently, the refusal to screen minors shot down, this canning of The Big Debate, a very, very pertinent, hard-hitting current affairs talk show. So this is a very political decision. The the SABC is completely diverting from its mandate, which is to deliver critical public interest broadcasting, to be balanced and fair and accurate. And now we are seeing a political decision to protect this elite. And what we're getting as the public is censorship and propaganda. And Hlaudi Motsoeneng, Mr. Sunshine Journalism, has been unashamedly admitting such, basically.
Okay, let's invite Phumzile van Dam, DA Shadow Minister for Communications. Thanks so much, Phumzile, for your time. You've also been very critical of the decisions that Hlaudi Motsoeneng, who seems to have become a menace or a law unto himself, have made. But in terms of being the Shadow Minister for Communications, when you deliberate about these things in your chambers of Parliament, what kind of response do you get when you raise these concerns?
Yeah, we have been raising the concerns at the SABC for some while now. This hasn't really started, it's not something that started recently. I think over the last year or so, it has accelerated quite quickly. So over and above all the other things that he's done with the editorial policy, which was approved in secret, there's two pieces of legislation that we're quite worried about. The first is the Broadcasting Amendment Bill, which was tabled in Parliament late last year, which removes Parliament's role in the appointing of board members. And then there's the Film and Publications Board Amendment Bill, which will also give government powers to censor what is said on the internet. So we're seeing a big project being run by the Department of Communications and the SABC to censor the media, and it's something that we're seriously concerned about.
Okay, let's just get a reaction from Micah here in terms of media freedom and diversity, where the rationale from the SABC is that there are certain groups who agree. These would be typically your religious groups or certain civic organizations that are in line with his thinking that perhaps when the cameras are there, the protesters tend to grandstand. What would you say to that?
I think it's firstly patronizing and secondly stupid to assume that people will just emulate what they see on TV. Hlaudi Motsoeneng said a similar thing not so long ago concerning the depiction of violent crime or coverage of violent crime on the news, saying basically that if violent crime is covered, it will encourage people to commit crime, which is just, it's so absurd that it's not really worth even responding to. It's farcical. But what it is doing, the effect of this is depriving us of our right to know. And it's an infringement on freedom of expression and the free flow of information, constitutionally enshrined rights.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, protest is a daily reality in this country. We are the protest capital of the world. These are serious public interest issues. Instead of just wishing this sort of thing away and pretending it's not happening, the SABC should be situating these sorts of stories in context. Giving us the true story of South Africa, warts and all, and letting the public decide, informing the public, not proselytizing and whitewashing the reality.
Yeah, but there's been very few opposition, I must admit, just going on to the wires, besides opposition parties, academia, and a more intellectual argument, if you will. Because if you look at typically who the SABC viewer is, and those that may not have the choice, as you and I have, and control of our remote, what does that then say about the dynamics or serving the clientele that the SABC, their bulk clientele serves?
I'm not sure I would agree with that. He's talking about people that agree with his decision and quoting some nameless religious leaders. There are people that agree with Donald Trump. Does that mean that he's a person who should be put anywhere near the presidency? Not by a long stretch. So you can always find lunatics anywhere you look. But saying that you've got some that support you, I don't think supports your argument. I don't think there's any evidence to support the fact that what the SABC is doing is correct. And you can't use a populist argument to justify that kind of a decision either. Saying, oh, we're going to do this because we all think public violence is a bad thing is not the same thing as saying we are deliberately censoring news that we're choosing to show you because we have some misguided and let's be clear about something else here. What are they actually trying to do? Because what we do know is that they have not yet produced any written, beyond their press release, statement about what their actual revision to their new policy is. Now, if you're a news organization and you limit your freedom of expression, that's an incredibly serious decision. Where's the board minutes? Where's the process that this was taken? And critically, where's the upward referral? Remember, he's elected himself as the editor-in-chief, but as a matter of upward referral, not as a matter of downward edict. And yet the way he's behaving is as in a patronizing and, to be honest, arrogant manner.
But William, I understand what you mean in the same that we need to be balanced about it. And if you just look at Twitter as well, for some reason there are people that do agree with Hlaudi, and we can't just have a universal
rape on Twitter as well. Does that mean that we should?
We can't expect to have a universal response to what you and I may perceive to be right or wrong. But let's just get Mpumzile in just in terms of taking action or remedial action for those viewers that feel their right to know has been compromised. You are paying your TV licenses, and by right you should then get the service. What kind of recourse, if any, is there for viewers?
I firstly would just like to agree with William and the gentleman from Right to Know. There's absolutely no research that the SABC has put forward to say we've done this research, and this research now proves that if you have violent images on television, people will then also go out and do the same thing. There's absolutely no scientific or any research that is done before this decision was taken. It is a purely political decision taken during an election campaign season where the ANC stands to lose a lot of support. Hlaudi wants to remove any images on television that could portray the SABC and the ANC in a negative light. He's also today announced that he's banned the reading of newspaper headlines on SABC radio. Why has he done this? He doesn't want negative newspaper headlines read about the SABC. So all these decisions Cloudy is making are all political decisions. He is clearly receiving instructions from the Tuli House to implement certain things to protect the SABC, to protect the ANC. Sorry, I keep making this word flip, ANC, SABC. So it's really all political, and there's recourses available at CASA, but ultimately I think in order to rid South Africa of people like Cloudy who get appointed to public institutions who then go there to further a specific political agenda, the only way to do this is to deal with it through an election and vote the ANC out of power.
Okay, Phumzile, let's take a caller, Moyo in Newcastle. Hello to you, and thanks for calling in. What's your comment or question?
Yes, good evening. My comment will be, firstly, this is not a political stand that has been, as the lady Phumzile is saying. But to tell you the truth, we need to deal with transformation. Saudi, our man, is coming with transformation in this country, especially when it comes to journalism and SABC. We are tired of seeing all these negative things in our media because, remember, we have kids at home. And if we publicize these negative things, we are then destroying our very own society. And lastly, I don't agree with two gentlemen over there on the studio and with Phumzile. First, it is not a political, what you call, whatever that is saying. But to tell you the truth, it is a point whereby we are saying as South Africans, we want to see what is right. This thing of freedom of whatever, it doesn't work. Our country is in trouble because of the journalism. We need transformation. There's a serious need of transformation. And lastly, transformation is painful. Many people will never love transformation. Either way, whether they like it or not, there must be transformation either way or other. Thank you very much.
All right, Moyo, thanks so much. We do have another call. I just didn't get your name. We'll come back to that. Just in response to the transformation, on the one side, there are those that applaud Saudi, the announcement of the 90% music content, and also the fact that there's more job security when it comes to freelancers who had been there for many, many years and having to renew their contracts every 12 months. They now at least have a longer period where they can plan their lives. And then comes all of these. We have to admit that he does have his supporters, be it right or wrong, and those also have the right to have those views. But what Moyo was saying in terms of transformation, can we look at that and maybe gauge him on that merit, whether transformation indeed has taken place in the SABC?
On what basis? I mean, if we're talking about transformation and undermining of process and institutional and the institution, yes, he's transforming it in a very fundamentally negative manner. I think his 90% local content is also fairly extraordinary. It's not to suggest that we shouldn't have far higher levels of local content, but I think we need to interrogate that. We see that instead of having an appropriate process, his proposed process for local content is come and see me. If I like it, the answer is yes. If I don't come back to me. Now, how do you propose, making sure you've got diversity of children's programming, of drama? What about African content? It's all well and fine to say we must look local, but how do we deal with the diversity within? How do we make sure that we are seen and are understood to be part of our continent? So in as much as we should say we should have far less cheap Western American programming, what about programming from other developing nations, and particularly our own continent? And those kinds of nuanced questions, to go in and with a big populist thing and saying we're going to have 90% and we're going to give jobs to everyone and we're going to do this, it sounds like a very nice thing to do. But the hardcore reality is I'm not sure that it's appropriate that your COO is making those kinds of decisions off their own bat.
All right, let me take a call. Masego in Pretoria, thanks so much for calling. And what's your comment or question?
Hi, I'd like to say that I agree completely with Claudie because as a young black person growing up and being raised by TV, I've learned to mimic so many things that I see on television, and 90% of the things are not right. I watch my niece today watching cartoons where kids her age are kissing, and the burning of schools is seen and is mimicked as well. It's not something a child just randomly thinks of just sitting at home. So it is good that we have to see more positive media, especially for black people, because every time you watch the news, black people are acting barbaric, and it's nothing positive to the black community. So it's hard for us to try be positive when you're constantly reminded that you're a negative person.
All right, Masego, thanks so much. Let's just go back to DA Shadow Minister Phumzile. Just your reaction when it comes to the criticism that the SABC had leveled at generally how the country and the government has been portrayed, saying that there had been a concerted effort in censoring good news stories. You know, if it bleeds, it leads, but if there's good news of what the government is doing, that's often not reported. What's your view?
That's absolutely untrue. The SABC often covers events of a positive nature in South Africa. They'll cover stories of ministers delivering houses. So it's absolutely not true that the news in South Africa is generally negative. News broadcasters have a responsibility to report what happens as happens. It's not up to them to alter the news and then make sure that they only report on sunshine journalism. They have a duty to report things as they happen. And the SABC's decision to try and alter the news is problematic just for that reason.
Okay, Deputy or Shadow Minister, thanks indeed. But just getting last parting shots from panelists here. Have we become so desensitized to violence, perhaps, that the more, especially in the newsroom, it becomes very vibrant? The more there's death statistics that we can report on, as I said, when it bleeds, it leads, that kind of thing. But do you think there is a merit to the argument that perhaps we need to be a little bit more sensitive in terms of what we show?
I don't think so. Having worked in media in other countries, I think our media handles violence quite sensitively and quite responsibly. I don't see any sort of apart from maybe the Daily Sun and a few others, I don't see violence being used to sell, being sort of sensationalized in the news. And again, I think that trying to whitewash this, trying to cover up, is not doing the public any good. The public has a right to know, needs to know the reality of South Africa, and should be making informed decisions. And pretending that protests are not happening, is just trying to wish them away. It's not going to do any. There's not going to be any positive spin-off from that.
Yeah. William, why should we be concerned about this particular move from the SABC? What do we take away as a society in terms of expressing your democratic right on the one side and also allowing state-owned entities or organizations to make executive decisions?
We need to be worried because this is a fundamental and clear attack on our constitutional democracy. It's that simple. If you support and want to exercise your right to freedom of expression, which, to be clear, was hard fought and came at a great cost to this country, you must fight to protect it. And this is a very clear attack. These things about the news and how bad violence is, are red herrings in this particular debate, which is not to say that there are not legitimate debates to have there. The problem with what has happened is that those are put up in order to justify, and it is a clear effort at censorship. We should have those debates about how we portray violence. The old SABC editorial policies had really good clauses on those that dealt with how you depict it and how you portray it. And as Micah quite correctly has pointed out, they're very good terms generally that our media deal with these kinds of things. They're not anywhere near as bad as some of the international media. We do have a long way to go around transformation. But to go and to suggest that some confused, befuddled, illegitimate, ill-thought idea of censoring the news and trying to say we're not going to show it is somehow going to stop people from protesting and using violence is simply fundamentally inaccurate and wrong and a clear direct threat to our democracy.
All right, William, thanks indeed as always for your time. William Bird is Director for Media Monitoring Africa, and Mika Reddy is Media Freedom and Diversity Organizer for Rights to Know. On the line, we had DA Shadow Minister for Communications, Phumzile Vandam. And thanks indeed to you at home for taking the trouble to call in. We take a quick ad break. We'll be back with Presents just after this.